Before we go, let's take a look at a tweet we received during the show. Ready? Okay, here it is. Keith Davidson tweets, Raymond Arroyo, you're a riot. That's Rebecca's tweet. Way to break through Laura's defenses. What defenses? She not only needs but deserves a hug. Ingram Angle. Oh, everybody loves Raymond.
Okay,
oh, please.
I had to come back. I ordered you a cuddle.
5,
and here
4,
are the cuddles.
3.
Come, cuddlers.
Cuddlers.
I ordered a cuddle.
I don't want
for
any
you.
professional
You
cuddlers.
needed a cuddle.
Go away. Have a good weekend. No cuddlers.
Tonight, you will hear for the first time from now Ambassador Rick Grenell, occupying one of the most important diplomatic posts in the world at the epicenter of negotiations over the Iran deal, NATO spending and trade. And then Kristen Fisher's digging deep into an unfolding Capitol Hill mystery, the controversial dismissal of the congressional chaplain by House Republicans. And is it legal to throw someone out of a bar in America for supporting the President of the United States? You'll want to stick around for Night Court. Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. New tonight, as the Koreans set the table for a deal and a key deadline approaches on the existing Iran nuclear deal, the President of the United States immediately puts a new diplomatic team to work. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo heading to Brussels for a NATO summit. Ambassador to Germany Rick Grenell huddling with the German Chancellor and the President tonight. You're going to hear from Ambassador Grenell in just a minute. Both men confirmed just hours ago by a Senate that had dragged out the process until the very last minute. They clearly have their work cut out for them. Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry kicks off our coverage tonight. Good evening, Ed.
Shannon, President Trump has already vowed he'll get up from the table and walk out of the room if Kim Jong-un turns out to be devious in their face-to-face talks. Today, he took it a step further by declaring he will not be played by the North Korean dictator. The president declaring that presidents in both parties have been played like fiddles in previous negotiations, and he's not going to fall into the same trap. At a joint news conference with the German Chancellor Angela Merkel, the president said the big differences this time are that he will keep the maximum pressure of economic sanctions on North Korea until Kim actually follows through on denuclearization, and that the president will also keep the military option on the table as well. The president adding in his classic style, he's doing this for the world, boasting that peace talks on the Korean peninsula have never gone this far before, just hours after Kim became the first North Korean leader to take that symbolic walk across the border into South Korea. The president also revealed the list of possible locations for the next big summit between the U.S. and North Korea has been whittled down to just 2 places. The president reminding the press corps it was just a few months ago that pundits in the media, as well as former senior officials from the Clinton, Bush, and Obama administrations, warned that the Trump administration was bringing the world to the brink of nuclear war with hot rhetoric.
Things have changed very radically from a few months ago. You know, the name calling and a lot of other things. We get a kick every once in a while out of the fact that I'll be watching people that failed so badly over the last 25 years explaining to me how to make a deal with North Korea. I get a big kick out of that.
The president's new Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, had that secret meeting with Kim and said today he believes the dictator is serious this time because the president's actions have convinced him his only real option is to come to the table. Likewise, Pompeo says the president is serious about standing up to Iran over its nuclear ambitions. And the secretary indicated the president is likely to pull out of the Obama-brokered nuclear deal on May 12th.
Absent a substantial fix, absent overcoming the shortcomings, the flaws of the deal, he is unlikely to stay in that deal past this May.
The question now is whether that's just a get-tough negotiating ploy to force European leaders like Merkel to embrace a secondary agreement that would deal with some of the president's concerns about the original agreement. French President Emmanuel Macron said earlier this week he's for pushing for a secondary deal, while Merkel today said the first deal is not enough to stop Iran, suggesting she too is moving toward the president on some kind of a side deal to make the original agreement stronger. Shannon?
All right, Ed Henry, thank you very much. Well, fresh off a contentious confirmation process, our next guest finds himself in the center of Trump diplomacy. We are happy he's here tonight for his first interview since being confirmed Ambassador to Germany, Rick Grenell. Does it feel weird to have Ambassador now in front of your name?
When I hear ambassador, I look for John Bolton
right.
or John Negroponte. I'm looking over my shoulder to see who it is. But
well, it's you now, and
yeah.
you referenced because obviously you served many years at the United Nations, so you come at this with a depth of knowledge and experience. You're ready to go, but it took a long time to get here. I mean, you passed out of the committee twice before you ever got to the Senate for a vote. Democrats tried to hold you up, including Senator Merkley. Now, I want to play a little bit of what he said about why he did and give you a chance to respond.
Cannot in good faith support a nominee who has a lengthy track record of tweets attacking both prominent Democratic and prominent Republican women.
He also said he didn't think that you are taking the Russia threat seriously.
Yeah. Look, I'm extremely excited to be confirmed. I'm going to be very diplomatic here. I wanted to talk to every senator and show them who I was, show them my writings. My writings are very clear. If you look at everything that I've talked about with Russia and the Russia threat, I've talked about the Russian threat in Eastern Europe for a very long time. I would argue that I was one of the first people to really call attention to what was being done to Voice of America and Radio Free Europe by the Russians. And so there's been a long threat there. And I wish that people would dig deeper and not just look at kind of surface issues.
So you had to jump right in today because obviously the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, was here today meeting with the president. You were with them as well. Let's talk a little bit about the president is always bringing this up with our NATO allies. Here he is talking today about getting to that 2% of GDP that all NATO allies are expected to do.
Other countries should be paying more. I mean, we're protecting Europe, and yet we pay by far more than anybody else. And NATO is wonderful, but it helps Europe more than it helps us.
So he said he's not singling out Germany, and they have said their next budget will be at 1.3%. But that's one of the things, obviously, you'll be in the middle of those conversations.
Yeah, and this is an important issue. There's no question about it. I think candidate Trump was very clear about trying to get the 2% to be a top issue. I saw it up close today. He's a master negotiator. President Trump is very good at what he does. And in negotiating about this issue, he's very tough. He's very fair. He points out details in negotiations. I think we're seeing that when it comes to the North Korea-South Korea issue. Here's a guy who understands that having just a threat of military action is not enough. It needs to be a credible threat. He's empowered the diplomats. He really does see diplomacy, if it's with someone who's tough, you can avoid war. You can accomplish things if you have diplomats that are tough. So watching him up close as the master negotiator today, for me, just really solidified why I early on wanted to support President Trump and candidate Trump, who became President Trump. It was a great process today. And I think he understands that we have this unbreakable bond with Europe, specifically with Germany. He complimented Chancellor Merkel many times. It was really, I think, a day for the Germans to see up close yet again. And President Trump knows the details on tariffs, on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which is a very serious issue. He would bring these issues up. It was very tough, very clear, but also very fair.
Well, and I know that they're talking about the Iran nuclear deal. Obviously, our European allies want that deal to stay together. The president has an important date coming up to talk about that, about whether or not the U.S. will formally stay a part of that deal. But you said even with all the tough talk and these uncomfortable issues they had today, behind the scenes, there was a real camaraderie with the two.
Yeah, look, at the end of the press conference, the president and the vice president both invited Chancellor Merkel, myself, and a couple of other people up to the residence to tour and to give a very specific, detailed explanation of every room up there. It was extremely warm. Chancellor Merkel hadn't done that. No previous president had taken her up there. She got to go into the Lincoln bedroom and see the Gettysburg Address. And President Trump really took time with the chancellor. And I think that the entire team really appreciates the fact that he can be very tough on the negotiation and he can be very charming. He's got a very good charm offense.
I got to ask you, much was made during this whole process through your nomination, the fight through the confirmation multiple times, about the fact that you are openly gay and probably considered one of the highest ranking members within the Trump administration, now officially as ambassador. Do you feel any added pressure or attention because of that?
No, I've been gay my whole life, so I'm very used to it. No, it doesn't make any difference to me. I mean, in my mind, I supported candidate Trump. He saw me up front and close about who I was. I have a great resume when it comes to diplomacy. I think it does matter.
All right, so pretty soon you make the move.
Yes,
the ground running, and that vacancy's been there a little bit. Do you feel like it'll take some time to build those relationships back diplomatically?
Well, certainly I'm going to work around the clock to do that. Working at the UN for 8 years, I'm reminded every day that the Germans and the Americans are on the same side on most every issue. I mean, when you work at the UN and you see the world the way it is, you're reminded that when it comes to liberty and human rights and a whole bunch of issues, we're on the same page. So I want to remind people that we have difficult issues to work through, but we are on the same team.
Well, it's been a long road for you, but now we congratulate you as you go to represent our country, all of us across the spectrum, as with a very important ally. We wish you all the best.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thanks for stopping in. All right, newly confirmed Secretary of State Mike Pompeo acknowledging today when it comes to North Korea in the past, promises have been made, hopes have been raised, and then dashed. But for those skeptical of Kim Jong-un's true intentions this time around, President Trump said this today.
Oh, I don't think he's playing. No, I don't think he's playing. And you know, it's never gone like this. It's never gone this far. I don't think it's ever had this enthusiasm for them wanting to make a deal.
Lan Hee-chen is a Hoover Institute Fellow and former policy advisor for Mitt Romney's 2012 presidential campaign. And Jonathan Wachtel is a former press secretary for UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. Gentlemen, welcome to you both.
Thank you, Shannon.
Okay, so let's talk about this. Christopher Hill, who is the lead U.S. negotiator with North Korea under the George W. Bush administration, says this is a start, what we're hearing from North and South Korea, but now we move on. He says, I'm guided by my experience, which was they said all the right things, but they gave us a declaration that was not complete and not entirely accurate, and they also failed to give us any kind of verification protocol. Lan Hee, let's talk about the tough next steps that come from, this very happy glow over what's happening in Korea, in the two Koreas, but now getting down to brass tacks.
Yeah, look, Shannon, I think there's great reason to be optimistic here, but I think also the warnings clearly matter a lot, and that there are some very sticky issues. The question of U.S. presence is something that, for example, the North Koreans consider to be a non-starter going forward. For the United States, there are big question marks around denuclearization. Is Kim Jong-un serious, not just about stopping the nuclear testing, but about ending his nuclear program? These are the tough questions that President Trump is going to confront should he sit down with Kim Jong-un. The signs are hopeful. I think the president deserves credit for moving us to where we are, but getting across the finish line is still a mammoth task.
There have been plenty of skeptics about whether we would even get to this moment. I want to read through some things over the last few months that have been said. Ben Rhodes, obviously of the Obama administration, tweeted back in September, every taunt back and forth between Trump and Kim Jong-un makes de-escalation and diplomacy less possible. Senator Tammy Duckworth in December saying this, we are far closer to actual conflict over North Korea than the American people realize. George Soros saying in Davos in January, the United States is set on a course towards nuclear war. Jonathan, do you think any of them thought we'd get to this point where now President Trump is taking credit, saying he's still got to close this deal and there's a lot to do, but do you think they ever thought what we've seen so far would happen on his watch?
Those pictures we all watched yesterday and this morning as they've been replayed were remarkable. We really are surprised by what has transpired, certainly between the two Koreas. But as you say, Shannon, there's a long ways to go to work things out. All sorts of complications lie ahead, from how do you actually put something like this in motion to bring two Koreas together with completely different governments, one that is completely autocratic, that has been cruel to its own people, another one that is a liberal democracy in comparison with a free economy. Completely different systems, completely different aspirations that we're at war and still are at war with each other. One that has nuclear weapons, another that doesn't, one that is still at war with the United States. Lots of complications. So all those lovely pictures that we saw that look so uplifting really belie a very complicated road ahead. And President Trump is going into negotiations, if they actually do happen, in a very complicated situation, not something that you really want to rush into. All this change of the tough rhetoric earlier in the year, in which Kim Jong-un, even in January, was excited about his nuclear arsenal and how he had clinched everything he needs to be a big player on the world stage. Now we find ourselves in a completely different scenario.
Well, and Lanhee, it's not just about the Koreas, it's not just about the U.S. I mean, there are other parties and other nations that are going to have some say, whether out front or through back doors like China.
That is true. Yeah, absolutely. The Chinese are the Chinese are critical in this discussion. I mean, if you think about the fact that they were actually a party to the original end of hostility or the termination of hostility agreement during the 1950s, they are a party to all of these discussions, and they're watching with a very careful eye toward North Korea here, because in a lot of ways, China controls the levers. I mean, China really is the elephant in the room when it comes to where North Korea goes, and in a lot of ways, Kim Jong-un is not going to do anything that runs across the Chinese. So fundamentally, the road to peace in the Korean Peninsula, the road to peace in terms of bringing North and South together, is still going to largely be dictated by the discussions the U.S. has with China, which is complicated further by the fact that we're playing this three-dimensional game of chess with China now, given the trade situation. So all these factors have to be taken into account as the president tries to have this negotiation.
Yeah, and this is just the beginning, as both of you have said. It is hopeful to. And Jonathan, thank you both for your expertise. Good to see you tonight.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, Paul Ryan, hit from the left and the right for dismissing the chaplain for the House of Representatives. Now, Kristen Fisher has been digging up details about what really happened. She joins us live next. And Republicans on the House Intel Committee say they've uncovered no evidence of Russian collusion in the 2016 election, but say that both campaigns made some poor choices. Stick around. First, you'll hear from a Democrat from the House Oversight Committee and Jason Chaffetz, the former head of that committee. See if they agree on any of this, if it's a case closed. The president claiming vindication by what Democrats are calling a one-sided Russia report, fueled by House Intel Committee Republicans tonight. The major finding: none of the witnesses interviewed by the House Intelligence Committee provided evidence of collusion, coordination, or conspiracy by the Trump campaign and the Russia government. The report did cite what it called ill-advised contact with WikiLeaks by Trump associates and highlighted the June 6th meeting Donald Trump Jr. had with Russian attorney Natalia Veselnitskaya. Today, a new revelation from Veselnitskaya saying she was a government informant for Russia's prosecutor general. So let's talk about it with Democratic Congressman from Illinois, Raja Krishnamurthy of the current Oversight Committee, and Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz, who used to chair that committee. Gentlemen, welcome to you both.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so let's start with a little bit more of what we hear from the committee. It says the committee found no evidence that the Trump campaign colluded, coordinated, or conspired with the Russia government. The investigation did find poor judgment and ill-considered actions by both the Trump and Clinton campaigns. Congressman, what do you make of what was issued today? And yes, it was authored by the Republicans.
Yes, it used to be that the House Intel Committee was a bipartisan committee, and they would issue one report, and unfortunately 2 reports were issued today, one by the majority and one by the minority. As you said, the majority said there was no collusion, and the minority basically said the investigation is incomplete. I think the one unanswered question that's on my mind is this whole meeting with Natalia Veselnitskaya that you had alluded to before. She admitted to be a Russian informant. Apparently, when questioned about Ms. Veselnitskaya, the chairman of the committee didn't know that she was an informant and didn't pursue investigations in this light. So I do think there are some questions, major questions, that are outstanding, and therefore I think that, in my humble opinion, the work of the committee is still incomplete.
Okay. Well, the ranking Democrat, Adam Schiff, on the committee said this, in part, to determine whether this evidence of collusion reaches the level of proof beyond a reasonable doubt of criminal conspiracy, we must await the report of special counsel Robert Mueller, since the majority refused to interview the witnesses and obtain the documents necessary to find out. Jason, your reaction to that characterization of what happened? And by the way, the last we heard, and this could have changed because it's secret, last we heard, though, Veselnitskaya had not been questioned by the special counsel investigators.
Well, look, Director Mueller, it'll be fascinating to see what he comes through. And I know there were some people that were not interviewed in deference to Director Mueller, but the committee did more than, I think, 75 interviews. There were countless hours. This has gone on for more than a year. And I still challenge the Democrats, who've been flailing since the time President Trump became President Trump, saying all this collusion, but they have no evidence of anything. And after all of this and all of these gyrations, they still don't have anything. There is no evidence out there to point to so-called collusion.
All right, I want to read something now that comes from Congressman Conaway, who is overseeing this particular investigation on the House Intel Committee, and get reaction from both of you. He says, I'm extremely disappointed with the overzealous redactions made by the intelligence community. My team and I will continue to challenge the IC's many unnecessary redactions with the hopes of releasing more of the report in the upcoming months. Congressman, he said that he was very disappointed that he promised the American people something much more transparent than what they were able to issue today. What do you make of that?
I actually saw the report, and that's true. There's tremendous number of redactions all over the place. So I'd like to know a little more about that. But I do think that this Veselnitskaya connection is troubling. I'm hoping that the Senate Intelligence Committee, which is acting in a bipartisan manner, will continue to run this down along with Special Counsel Mueller. And I would just say that I hope that we speed to a conclusion on this, but I think that more injurious than continuing this investigation would be not answering all these very important questions.
Jason, final word to you.
The Intelligence Committee does not make the decision about what is redacted and what is not. This is a systemic problem across every department and agency. Far too much is redacted. The American people want to see this. The members of Congress on both sides of the aisle want it out there, and they should put it out there.
Former chairman and congressman of the Oversight Committee, Jason Chaffetz, and current congressman, Democrat on that same committee, Krishnamurthy. Thank you both for being in today.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Congressman Chaffetz.
All right, questions tonight on Capitol Hill from lawmakers wondering why the generally well-regarded House chaplain was dismissed by Speaker Paul Ryan. Now, Kristen Fisher has been investigating this for us tonight. What have you uncovered?
Shannon, this is quite the mystery up on Capitol Hill. The Speaker's office still won't say officially on the record why Patrick Conroy was asked to resign. Republicans say that Ryan told them he fired him because he wasn't doing a good job. But the leading theory among Democrats is that he fired him over something he said in a prayer back in November, right in the middle of the heated debate on the GOP tax bill. Here it is.
May all members be mindful. May their efforts these days guarantee that there are not winners and losers under new tax laws, but benefits balanced and shared by all Americans.
So that winners and losers line, that is the line that Democrats and some Republicans say Speaker Ryan had a problem with, especially when you take into account what Reverend Conroy told the New York Times, that shortly after, Ryan warned him to, quote, stay out of politics.
The Speaker may have fired him for political reasons because he didn't like the words that were in a prayer or two.
Even some Republicans are apparently upset now. Congressman Pete King from New York said, quote, I'm not aware of any discontent or any criticism, and to be the first House chaplain to be removed in the history of the Congress in the middle of a term raises serious questions. We deserve more of an explanation. And why? Was there political pressure? So today, Democratic Congressman Joe Crowley introduced a bill calling for a new bipartisan committee to investigate why Ryan did this. Well, that is,
the lack of notification of his forced resignation or adequate explanation provided by Speaker Paul D. Ryan is not reflective of the integrity of the House of Representatives.
No surprise, the bill was later rejected. Now, just a little bit about Reverend Conroy. He's a Roman Catholic priest. He's served as the House chaplain for 7 years. In that role, his job is to counsel lawmakers and to open the House each day with a prayer, something he did today, perhaps a little bit awkward. His last day is now less than a month away. It will be the first forced ouster of a chaplain in the history of the House. It's a big deal, Shannon.
And I wonder if we'll hear more, if there will be statements or a little bit more forthcoming. Just explanation for people who may be jumping to conclusions we don't know.
Maybe.
All right, well, let us know what you find out.
I will.
Good to see you.
Thanks.
All right, conservatives under attack on social media, from Candace Owens to Diamond and Silk, even a group of high school students because they prayed in public before a meal. What gives? Trace Gallagher joins us next on that. And a new twist into the sexual misconduct allegations against Tom Brokaw. Could this be the end of the iconic newsman's career? A new low. High school students pausing to pray before a meal in public, and some on the web went into full meltdown mode. Trace Gallagher from LA Tonight on social media backlash for conservatives. Hey, Trace.
Shannon, it took 6 days, but Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey has now apologized for describing conservative activist Candace Owens as being far right. After rapper Kanye West praised Owens, the Twitter headline said, quote, Kanye says he likes the way far-right media personality Candace Owens thinks. Owens quickly fired back, quoting, far right, allow me to clarify. I believe the black community can do it without handouts. I believe the Democrats have strapped us to our past to prevent us from our futures. And I won't stop fighting until all black Americans see that. I'm not far right, I'm free. Jack Dorsey finally wrote, quote, hi Candace, I want to apologize for our labeling you far right. Team completed a full review of how this was published and why we corrected far too late. And while we're on the subject of social media, Frank Somerville, a very fine and longtime news anchor for our Fox affiliate in the Oakland, San Francisco Bay Area, shared a photo on his Facebook page of some teenagers saying grace before the prom. The photo was sent by the mother of one of the teens with the quote, now with the stories today about teenagers and Tide Pods and condoms gathering headlines, this picture speaks for itself. Well, that set off a debate among Somerville's followers. One writing, quote, saying grace over your food says nothing of your moral compass, integrity, or character. And this, quoting, my guess is their opinions on gay marriage, interracial families, equal rights, and other things we hold dear might not thrill you. Many others defended the photo, saying that not once did anyone say these kids are better than non-Christian kids. Frank Somerville says he's surprised by how many people took offense, but that he encourages people to have honest discussions about his post. Meantime, Trump supporters and bloggers Lynette Hardaway and Rochelle Richardson, better known as Diamond and Silk, went before the House Judiciary Committee to accuse Facebook and Twitter of suppressing their conservative videos by labeling them unsafe to the community. Watch.
Facebook censored our free speech, and shame on the ones that don't even see that we have been censored. Yet when the Black Lives Matter people complain about it, oh, everybody is up in arms.
Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg says the label was due to a, quote, enforcement error, adding that the company reached out to the duo to reverse it. The hearing eventually devolved into a shouting match, with Democrats arguing that the success of Diamond and Silk belies any claim that they were silenced. Shannon.
Trace, thank you very much. By the way, Tom Brokaw has canceled an upcoming commencement speech at Connecticut's Sacred Heart University. The NBC News anchor was accused of sexual harassment by former NBC and Fox reporter Linda Vester. Brokaw says he doesn't want to be a distraction on graduation day. Meanwhile, NBC News chairman Andy Lack telling NBC employees the network takes the allegations against Brokaw very seriously. He denies them. Lack promising the network will act quickly and decisively when the facts dictate. And in a new twist tonight, more than 60 women, including Rachel Maddow, Andrea Mitchell, and Maria Shriver, are voicing support for Brokaw. And taking Brokaw's place as commencement speaker at Sacred Heart will be a member of President Trump's cabinet and a fellow Connecticut. Well, she ran for the Senate there not long ago. Linda McMahon, she's the head of the Small Business Administration. Well, an iconic pop group making a comeback. First new song in 36 years. Can they live up to their legacy? And an update on baby Alfie. Last we've checked, he's still fighting even though doctors stopped feeding him days ago. We'll talk about it with Dr. Siegel when we return. At last check, baby Alfie Evans is still clinging to life, which his doctors reportedly did not expect to happen. He's a 23-month-old toddler in Britain who's captivated the world. Hospital authorities say he has no chance for a life moving forward, so they've taken off his life support. So he's not getting food, but water and reportedly some oxygen. His very distressed parents staying by his side. They want to take him out of the country for alternative care, but they've been stopped by the British government. Dr. Mark Siegel is a Fox News medical contributor and joins us now to talk about this tough case. Doctor, thank you for being with us tonight. What do you make of where we are in this case?
This is really a shocking case, Shannon, because so many people are conflicted over this and there's so much debate. But what's shocking about it is it's not just a rationing case. It's not just a case where the National Health Service, which is not surprisingly very, very unpopular in Great Britain right now, coming out of a recession with all kinds of rationing going on, that they would decide to save money by cutting back and saying, well, what about the quality of life here? The child had so many infections, has had seizures, is brain damaged, we're going to pull back. That's the rationing part. But the parents are saying, we want to take the child out of the hospital, keep him on life support, and take him to another country which is ready to accept him. So then it becomes a moral issue where literally the government is superimposing their judgment on the parents, on the child, and using a 1989 Child Abuse Act that was designed to prevent parents from abusing children, which is clearly not the case here. So I think the legal aspects of this are all fouled up, and clearly the medical aspects. Shannon, in my entire career, I've never had the government ordering me to stop taking care of a patient, not once.
Well, yeah, and there are some interesting cases in the past. Aisha King was a little boy who years ago in the UK, the NHS was treating him for some type of brain cancer, and he wasn't getting the care that his parents thought he should get. They took him out of the country without permission. They were eventually arrested in Spain. They'd taken him to Prague for care. They now celebrated 3 years cancer-free for him. So there was another treatment somewhere else, another country, another place that was willing. And in their case, it worked. These are UK parents. In Texas, though, what people don't know is that hospital administrators there also have the ability to go to court and to petition when it's time, they believe, to take off life support. A father years ago got in trouble because his son was there after suffering a stroke. The doctors wanted to take him off life support. This guy took a gun to the hospital and said he was going to buy whatever time he could with his son. There was a big standoff. Eventually, he served time in jail, but his son is fully recovered. I mean, is it fair to say that doctors don't always know exactly what's going to happen in every case?
Yes, Shannon, and by the way, in addition to Texas, those laws are in existence in Tennessee and Connecticut in the United States, so it's a fair point you're making that it's not just the UK. But to your other point, of course we don't always know. And you know what really bothers me about Alfie Evans? We don't even have a diagnosis here. I mean, I haven't seen, obviously, all of the imaging. I haven't examined the patient, but the doctors can't even tell us what he's suffering from, just that he's getting worse. So, of course, we would want another set of eyes on it. We would want other physicians involved. We would want other hospitals involved. How can you turn down another hospital that's saying we want to try to take care of this child without even knowing what the child is suffering from? And with Charlie Gard, at least there was a diagnosis, and an expert flew over from the United States and said, you know, I don't think I can help this child. In this case, we don't even have an answer. That's deeply disturbing to me. I don't withdraw care. My role as a physician is to prolong life and decrease suffering. And again, we don't have evidence that this baby is suffering. We have evidence, though, that the government is trying to shorten the child's life. And I think it's a spiritual lacking in this situation.
Well, you've always given me good medical advice. For that, I am thankful, Dr. Siegel. Thank you for weighing in on Alfie's case as well.
Great to see you, Shannon.
You as well. By the way, there is a member of European Parliament trying to introduce Alfie's Law there to help him out. Well, time now for Where in the World. Mexicans marching tonight, not against President Trump, but against something called forced disappearances. The Mexican government says more than 15,000 people between 13 and 29 years old are simply missing. It's not clear where they are. And that is the problem for these marchers who say they perceive a lack of justice in Mexico for those who may have been kidnapped or killed by the cartels, and a complete lack of interest in finding all these people who are missing. Well, Spain considering harsher penalties for sex assault after a court cleared 5 men of allegedly gang raping a teenager. They're dubbed the Wolf Pack. They allegedly filmed the whole thing on their phones, but were convicted of much lesser crimes than rape. Protests continue there tonight in several Spanish cities. And we're learning about a massacre tonight at a school in northern China. A 28-year-old man arrested for allegedly killing 7 students and wounding 12 others with a knife as they were leaving school. And ABBA, the Swedish pop group, will release 2 songs later this year. The first songs from the group in 36 years. It's estimated ABBA sold 375 million albums. And by the way, we're told in 2010, they turned down a $1 billion offer to reunite. Stand by for those tunes. Well, it used to be one of the year's biggest events in Washington, but has the White House Correspondents' Dinner lost its luster since the president will not go? Howie Kurtz joins us on that next. And does a bar have the right to throw you out if you're a Trump supporter wearing a MAGA cap? Our legal eagles battle it out in night court. It's time for what we affectionately call the Nerd Prom, here again in Washington. The White House Correspondents' Dinner is slated for tomorrow night. And once again, President Trump has turned down an invite to hold a competing event for his supporters, knowing there'll be a much friendlier crowd than the members of the media. Well, Media Buzz host Howard Kurtz has the story. Howie.
In case anyone thinks President Trump might be mellowing on the media, his Fox and Friends interview with another jab at Meet the Press moderator Chuck Todd offered fresh evidence of his resentment.
I don't watch NBC anymore. They're as bad as CNN. I don't. And by the way, I made them a fortune with The Apprentice. Think of that one.
And for the second straight year, the president is skipping the White House Correspondents' Dinner, breaking with a decades-long tradition and counter-programming with a rally in what he calls the other Washington, Michigan. That will draw ample attention away from the annual journalist gathering. Here's what happened a year ago.
Mr. President, the media is not fake news.
They are gathered together for the White House Correspondents' Dinner without the president, because, as you know, they are a disgrace. The Washington media is part of the problem. Their priorities are not my priorities, and they're not your priorities, believe me.
Trump isn't only dissing the news business, he's using it as a foil to raise money. Here's what he says in a fundraising letter. Why would I want to be stuck in a room with a bunch of fake news liberals who hate me? Hate is a strong word. Not all journalists hate the president, although studies have shown an unprecedented level of negative coverage. And Trump tends to play to his base, which distrusts the press when he gets in front of a crowd, as he did last month in Pennsylvania.
I'm on Meet the Press, a show now headed by Sleepy Eyes Chuck Todd. He's a sleeping son of a bitch, I'll tell you.
And yet he's held off-the-record meetings with Todd at the White House. The president has also been unloading on New York Times correspondent Maggie Haberman, as he did after she wrote a piece saying Trump hasn't always been kind to his loyal attorney, Michael Cohen. The New York Times and a third-rate reporter named Maggie Haberman, known as a crooked H flunky who I don't speak to and have nothing to do with. But Trump, who knows Haberman well from New York, has granted her several interviews. And as this picture posted by a colleague shows, she's not someone the president has nothing to do with. Maggie Haberman shared a Pulitzer Prize last week, another sign of the gap between the president's view and that of the media establishment. That chasm will be on display again Saturday night, when White House correspondents are receiving awards, and the president will undoubtedly be accusing them of peddling fake news. Shannon?
All right, Howie Kurtz, thank you very much. Time now for Night Court. Meet Greg Piatek. You see him here in his Make America Great Again, or MAGA hat. Well, he claims after he wore that hat to a bar in New York's West Village early last year, he was told he was not welcome. He sued the Happiest Hour, that's the name of the place, claiming he was discriminated against because of his political views. Well, a Manhattan judge tossed his case this week, ruling the law does not protect against political discrimination. Let's talk about it with tonight's Legal Eagles, criminal defense attorney David Bruno and former criminal defense attorney Emily Campagno. Welcome to you both tonight.
Good evening, Shannon.
Thank you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this because it's been kind of all over the place here. We have a statement from the plaintiff. He claims that the staff told him this: anyone who supports Trump or believes what you believe is not welcome here, and you need to leave right now because we won't serve you. David, is that okay?
Yes, even assuming that is what was said, that is okay within the law. Personally, I don't agree with it. However, under the law, under our federal law, there are certain classes that are protected for discrimination. For example, religion, age, gender, things like that. Political affiliation is not one of them. So if it's not protected under federal law, the next question is it protected under state law? And under New York's law, it is not. So that is why it would be okay. That is why the judge issued his opinion as he did.
Okay, so this is something that we get now from the owner of this bar. He says this: at the happiest hour, we firmly support women's rights, marriage equality, gun control, the environment, and regard for the truth. We don't discriminate. Says the guest wasn't kicked out because he was wearing a Trump hat. He was asked to leave after being verbally abusive to our staff, which is something we don't tolerate, regardless of who you are. Emily.
Right. If that was the case, then indeed, of course, if a patron is not complying with the rules and regulations of that particular establishment, then of course they can be kicked out. If those rules are don't verbally harass our staff, which is conducive. But I want to comment on what David said, that absolutely this isn't a protected class in that particular city. This isn't Seattle, for example, where a political affiliation is. So the standard that the judge employed here was whether it was outrageous. And I personally feel it is outrageous to kick out a patron, as he claims, for wearing the campaign slogan of the now elected president. And I could find a comparator in the coffee shop in Oakland that refused service to any uniformed police officer. To me, I mean, I'm not a public moralist, but why don't they say, look, actually, this beer's on me, to you with a MAGA hat, and I'd like you to tell me, why did you vote for this person? Or to the cop in Oakland, why don't we give you a cup of coffee for free, and we invite you to sit down with our community, and let's foster a discussion so that we can bridge that gap, rather than, to me, employing the same ugliness that this bar claims that hat stands for.
Okay, I want to get you both quickly to react to this, because the story was tweeted out. The judge rules that the bar can refuse service to Trump supporter wearing the MAGA hat. Conservative gay columnist and pundit, great on Twitter, Gabriel Maller, tweeted this: bake the damn cake. Referring these cases, we're waiting for a big one from the Supreme Court right now about whether or not, people who run a bakery can decline, or photographers for a wedding business, that kind of thing, can decline to take part or lend their talents to something that they don't agree with. What do you make of the tweet? David, we'll start with you.
Yeah, like you said, big case coming out of the United States Supreme Court. It's a little bit different, though, because there the bakers are relying on the First Amendment to say that's a violation of their First Amendment expression of religion. So it's really not comparing the same issue here.
And quickly, Emily, 10 seconds.
Right, I agree with that. It has to do whether they can express that on their own. So again, it goes back to that protected class. But I want viewers to understand here the standard. If it's not protected, again, if it's outrageous or whether it doesn't sit well, it would really help if we would foster that further rather than stating no to begin with.
Can't we all just get along? Is that what you're saying, Emily? We'll see. All right,
Yes.
thank you, David and Emily. We send it out to you at home. Tweet us at Fox News Night or at Shannon Bream to let us know what you think about the case. And for tonight, this Friday, most watched, most trusted, most grateful you spent the evening with us. Have a great weekend. Good night from Washington. I'm Shannon Bream. We'll see you Monday, 11 p.m. Eastern.